Is anyone who writes a writer? Is anyone who swims? A swimmer is anyone who sings, a singer, and my initial reaction to that is no.
Does that make you not a photographer?
Welcome back to Shoot for Meaning. Today we are going to ask a seemingly simple question, but one that we found actually pretty tough to answer. And that is everyone a photographer? Satire, have you heard people say everyone's a photographer?
All the time. I hear people say, oh yeah, I'm shooting on my phone. I love photography. I'm a photographer, but I use my phone. And I think really there's a huge culture of, especially social media with Instagram. Everyone takes photos. Everybody posts them. Everybody gets feedback on them, which all seem like it could make you a photographer, but some people disagree. So I posed this question to the general public on Instagram, and I got a few responses. One from an anonymous non-photographer said, I think everyone can be a photographer. The difference is just the level of intensity and passion. Another photographer, who I'll tag below, Amatash Clicks, said, a photographer isn't just clicking. They're thinking about light, story, and emotion. It's like the difference between someone who cooks and someone who's a chef. Both make food, but one does so with a deeper understanding and one with purpose. Another photographer said almost the opposite. They said, yes, but not everyone is good at it. Everyone that shoots a photo is a photographer. Anyone that performs science is a scientist. And anyone who rides a bike is a cyclist. This was from Fujinius Photos.
That one is really interesting because it really begs a comparison to other things. It makes me ask, is anyone who writes a writer? Is anyone who swims? A swimmer is anyone who sings, a singer, and my initial reaction to that is no. That, I think, is what makes this question so hard. It has to do with the reason we take pictures or the reason we sing and maybe our commitment to it.
What do you mean by commitment? Do you mean time or energy?
Probably both, because if someone is a singer, they spend time and energy to get better. They are self-conscious about how well they sing. Whether they are good or not is actually a different question. It's actually about whether the singer wants to be good. And maybe that same thing applies to a photographer. Photographer is someone who takes pictures with the intent to be good, possibly to get better.
But that poses the question, doesn't everyone want to be good at everything?
I don't know. I think that is an interesting question because it seems like, for the most part, people who take pictures to record a memory. Picture of a nice dinner, a picture with their parents, a picture on vacation, and they want to share what they're doing, share something interesting, and have that in the future to recall. But a photographer is thinking about and trying to make the best visual piece of communication they can, which means that they're probably changing how they shoot photos every time they take one.
That's really interesting. Do you think that determines style when you say changing every time they take a photo? Because generally a style is pretty consistent throughout a photographer's career.
I don't know if it's just style, because I think on the way to developing a style, you need to understand what it is that you like, but understanding what it is that you like takes a lot of experimentation. And when you're experimenting with photography, you're experimenting with, of course, the three standard aspects, which are light, motion, and composition. And while you do that, you develop a style. But it takes a long time to get to a style that you recognize as your own and that other people may recognize as their own. If we come back to this question about, is everyone a photographer? It really forces us to ask the question, what is a photographer?
Linguistically, a photographer is someone who takes photographs. But my personal first impression of that is that it's not quite that simple. To me, a photographer is determined by, like we said, passion, time, maybe a little bit of money, but that's a little bit harder to say for sure, and effort. Whether or not you're getting better or not, the determination, the grit, the overcoming personal doubt, and all of these things that make someone a photographer, which of course takes time to realize that there is a goal, to develop a goal, to try and reach that goal even if you don't get to it.
So that makes me wonder, some people take a lot of pictures. We have friends, of course, who post a lot of photos online. They take pictures at a lot of different events, but a lot of the photos look kind of the same. And that's okay. It makes me wonder, does quantity of photos taken make you a photographer? In other words, if you take a lot of photos, then you must be a photographer?
I think it's very easy for everyone to take a lot of photos, especially, again, phones. It's just a matter of whether you have it out or not. I'm going to quote Amatash Clicks, they're thinking about light, story, and emotion, not just clicking.
I've been shooting for a long time, and I've heard a lot, hey, that's a great photo, what kind of camera do you have? Have you heard that too?
All the time.
So it makes me wonder, does the camera make the photographer?
I don't think so. In fact, I have a shirt that says, it's not the camera, it's the person behind it. And yet, I get asked all the time, how does your camera take great photos like that? Which camera should I get? Should I get this one? Should I get this one to make me a better photographer? But I don't think it's determined by the camera.
So you don't need a real camera to be a real photographer?
Well, let's define what a real camera is. Are you thinking mirrorless or DSLR? There's a lot of different things.
I'd say a real camera is a camera that you have control over. You can determine what it's doing with the light that is coming through the lens. I think that a phone, basically a computer with a lens. And for the most part, unless you override the automated settings, it's making all the decisions for you. In fact, it's making not just focus decisions, but it's also making lighting decisions, which seems strange, like it shouldn't be able to change the light, but it actually changes the exposure and it will automatically brighten people's faces and dark the background and blur the backgrounds and do all that automatically without your control. So I would say a real camera is one that you can decide what decisions to make.
What about those little digicams that are about this big that people kind of point and shoot?
I think those count because they don't make a lot of decisions for you unless you put them on fully automatic. Even then, you're still determining what to focus on, whereas a phone will decide for you. But I'd say those small point and shoots are more of a real camera than a phone because you still have some control over the decisions. But a real camera is like one you have here, where you set it up so that you can make all the decisions. In fact, you even manual focus. That makes that, to me, a real camera. But it brings us back to this question, do you have to have a real camera to be a real photographer? Is the gear related to whether you're a photographer or not?
I don't think it's an absolute definition, but I think it's a lot easier to be a quote-unquote real photographer with a real camera because it kind of forces you to think about your composition and your focusing and you're making these very conscious decisions about lighting and about framing and all of these things. Whereas a phone, if you know it's going to make those decisions for you, you're not going to try and make those decisions.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's exactly right. And maybe you're using the phone because you don't want to make those decisions.
Does that make you not a photographer?
Yeah, I think it does. I think if you give the decision making to something else, you are not a photographer. And maybe this is like handing your camera to someone else and allowing them to make the decisions about your photo for you. If you do that using your camera, does that make you a photographer? Seems like no. So maybe the only difference is with the phone, you're the one who's deciding when, but all the other decisions are made for you.
So let's say there is someone who takes photos on their phone, but they, as much as they can, try to override those automatic decisions. Does that make them a photographer?
In that case, I would say yes. They have changed the gear to serve the needs of a photographer, which are to make decisions about how that photo gets made. And then I would say that camera is now a real camera.
That's interesting. So it's more, again, about the person behind it than the camera itself.
It is.
In technological terms.
Yes.
Again, who isn't a photographer?
Anyone who takes a picture but doesn't dictate how the photo is taken, other than what the camera is pointed at and when to click the shutter. I think those are people who take photos, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that to be a photographer, you have to have some, I think you used the word intentionality about the result. And it could be as simple as, even if you're using your phone and you are taking a picture of a nice plate of food, but you move around some candles or you reposition yourself so that the lighting is better, I think at that point, you start to become a photographer.
You said start to become. Are you saying it's a range or a gradient?
Yeah, I think it is. And I don't know what scoring system you use to decide who's more of a photographer than who else, but certainly if you spend a lot more time and energy making decisions, that makes you more of a photographer than someone who spends very little. And if you spend no time making decisions about the result, then you're not a photographer. You may be someone who takes pictures, maybe someone who takes photos, but I don't think you're a photographer. What do you think?
I agree with that. I have a bit more of a personal question though. When did you realize that you were a photographer and what changed your opinion on that?
I realized I was a photographer when other people started asking me, where is your camera? By then, I'd already been taking lots and lots of photos, but I didn't think of myself as a photographer. I thought of myself as someone who liked to take pictures. And maybe that's the same thing, but I didn't realize that until at birthday parties, your birthday parties, or family events or weddings, people started to ask, hey, Ted, where's your camera? This thing's about to happen, or this thing is happening. How come you're not shooting it? And then I recognized that I think I'd become a photographer. Yeah, what about you?
Sorry, I'm going to go back to what you said and just ask a question.
Yeah.
If you're saying that you thought you were a photographer because other people saw you as a photographer, do you think that people who maybe have critics that don't think they're a real photographer don't count as photographers?
I don't think that other people's opinion determines whether you are or not. But I think for me, I probably became a photographer sometime before, but I didn't realize it until someone else said it. So the transition happened probably after we went to Africa for the first time, or when we went to Africa for the first time back in 2009. We bought, your mom and I decided instead of buying calendars of elephants and lions, we would buy our own camera and take pictures ourselves, even though we knew they weren't going to be as good. But we also knew they were going to be our memories and not someone else's. But when we were there taking pictures, we spent a lot of time trying to make as good of a photo as we knew how to make. And I remember your mom taking something like 82 pictures of a leopard sitting in a tree that didn't move. But she was hoping to take a picture of the leopard coming down from the tree, which would have been a really cool action shot. It never did, but that's what she was trying to do. When I used that camera, I also tried to take as interesting of a photo as I could of the hippos and the lions around a pond in the Ngorongoro crater of Tanzania, because the juxtaposition of red sand and the green reeds and orange hair and the hippo was fascinating. Moving myself in the Jeep to get a better composition, spent a lot of time trying to do that. So I think that happened, but I didn't realize I was becoming a photographer until, again, other people asked me, why aren't you shooting?
That's really interesting. I can agree with that.
Yeah. Well, what about you? When did you become a photographer? I mean,
I don't know when I became a photographer, but I think I realized I wanted to be a photographer when my brother Nikhil stopped taking photos. So we both of our first cameras were little Lumixes. Loved those cameras. We took them to Imeri in Africa, 2018.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
2018, 2019. And both of us had our cameras. We both took thousands of photos, probably, and then just gave them to Dad to edit and stuff. And then I think a year or two after, Nikhil stopped taking photos. He decided he wanted to sell his camera and he didn't like it anymore. And being a twin, I'm very used to doing everything the same as my brother. People expecting us to do the same things, especially when we were younger. And I realized I didn't have to stop and I didn't want to stop. And I think that started me off as a photographer.
Right. That's pretty interesting. Do you think there are levels to being a photographer?
I do think there are levels to being a photographer. Of course, there's the greats, the ones with the big names, the famous ones. But even below that, there are people who take photos who may consider themselves photographers. Yeah, I think there are different levels, but I don't think it's determined by actual skill. To me, the gradient of photographers is passion.
Okay. That's interesting. So do you think that if you have more passion, you're more of a photographer, even if your results are quote unquote less good?
I think there does have to be a little bit of a result to that passion to kind of get people to recognize how much of a photographer you are, but it's not directly correlated to me.
Okay. So going back to the question of, is everyone a photographer? I want to ask you this follow-up question, which is, okay, if there are photographers and non-photographers, even though all of them, really all of us who have a phone, we all take pictures. Does being a photographer come with responsibilities? And if so, what are they and to who do you owe those responsibilities?
I think that's a very personal question. As a photographer, I would say there is no responsibility to a singular person or group, even company. You might have some brand loyalties, but I don't think that's a responsibility. I do feel a little bit of responsibility towards the photography community. I want to make a good name for us. I want to represent well. I want to bring people into the community and kind of make sure that it's a good, safe, even personal community, but definitely not to a specific person.
What about to yourself?
A responsibility to myself. I think I hold myself accountable for being a good photographer in terms of skill and, let's say, soft skills, like being a kind person, not being a bad person with a camera. Again, to represent the community and to show people how amazing photography can be.
So you're talking about things like being respectful, not being intrusive, maybe even not blocking other photographers. Some people do, unfortunately. You gotta respect each other, guys. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. I think we had a pretty broad and deep discussion about whether everyone's a photographer. So what do you think at the end of this? Everyone is a photographer?
No, I think a photographer is someone who dedicates time and thought and effort into an art form, no matter the gear. Someone who disregards automated decisions, if there are any. What do you think?
I think that's right. I think that intentionality is really what makes the photographer. It's someone who tries to do better with every shot, even if they fail, which we all do, to do that every time. I think to the wider audience out there, you're wondering, am I a photographer? I think if you are somebody who is intentional about their work, is trying to improve, invests time and energy into understanding how the gear works, how visual communication works, and is trying to produce better and more interesting and more effective work every time, yeah, you're a photographer. And if you just take pictures of your food to share memories with your family and friends, that's great too. You don't have to be a photographer. But if you want to be, it'd be great. Come join us in the photography community and show us what you can do. So with that, please tell us what you guys think. Are you a photographer? Are you not? What makes the difference? Is there a difference? Comment below, like, subscribe to this video, and we hope to catch you in the comment section soon.
And as always, shoot for meaning.
Bye.